So, as for as much as I like this, that is the only downer for me. Hello and welcome to Tracy Momey Reads. I'm back again this week with another book review. I don't know if you guys saw a video I did like a few weeks ago where I talked about some of the books that were on my TBR list, my to be read list. And one of the books that I showed was this book, The Time Salvager. And I said, I'm going to read this book next. And that's what book I read next. So today I'm going to be giving you guys a review of The Time Salvager. This book is a sci-fi book. One of the first sci-fi books that I have ever read to completion. And I will admit, getting into it was kind of hard. But once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. First off, let me just, give props to all these science fiction writers and even I don't know, I guess like the Harry Potter type books. I don't know if that would be considered sci-fi or what kind of genre that would really, fantasy maybe, where these worlds are built, from things that don't totally exist. Because a lot of times with fiction books, as an author, I'll maybe, let's say if I create a city, it's going to be based on something real, something that the readers can actually relate to, something that they've seen or experienced. But a lot of times with these sci-fi and fantasy type books, these authors are like creating stuff that doesn't even exist. And the amount of just creative talent you have to do something like that is just, it's incredible, and it's very commendable that they are able to weave together these stories that not only have interesting characters, but that provide all of this imagery. And that's exactly how it was in The Time Salvager. So basically, the book is a futuristic book. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, a dystopian society, kind of where like Earth has basically been destroyed. And I will tell you, as I was reading, it was kind of scary in some parts. Not scary because of like the book, but the way that the author would describe how the world came to an end. It was just eerily similar to things going on today about how humanity just collapsed because everybody was so focused on themselves and so much greed and, taking the earth for granted and just all this stuff that could potentially happen. And there was this line in there where one of the characters was talking about how by the year 3000, that humans will become extinct. So it's just, maybe a cautionary tale found in this fiction book. But the book is based on a character by the name of James. He's like the main character, and he is what they call a chron man. I think it's chron man or maybe chronoman. And I think that prefix dealt with chronological, it's like kind of the prefix or the root word, if you will, meaning, timeline of sorts. Because what he did, he was way in the future, right? And his job, he would time travel to the past to some of these, like continents or planets where they had just really just been devastated and destroyed, and like there's hardly any humans living there, if any, but there's maybe wreckage of, let's say if it's trains or supermarkets or whatever, and maybe there's like a power source or something that's still there that can be used for something in the future to help the people that have like gone into another planet. Because the planet where he lived, it was heavily populated, and they needed power sources and they needed all this stuff to help their people survive. So he would do these time jumps, go back in time to get things to bring back, that they could salvage. Hence the title of the book, The Time Salvager. So with the whole thing of time travel, there were all these like absolute laws, that were in place. And like you couldn't like save somebody that was already gonna die, like if you went back, let's say, and I hate to use such a horrible time in history, but it was actually in the book. Let's say you go back to during Hitler's reign, right? And he did go back there to get something. And there were like the people in the future, they already knew, I mean, how that's going to play out, and like there's going to be bombings and all these people are going to die and all this stuff's going to happen. You can't interfere with that. You can't make it not happen. And there were people there that were going to die because there was a bomb coming, and the people that were in that particular building, they were going to die. So like you have to let that play out. And that kind of was the thing that started to weigh on James's conscience, is like, but I could bring them back, or I could help them, or I could do something. But they were saying that any thing that you did there in the present, and this is kind of like most movies or stories that you read about time travel, it's like you'll put a ripple in the time space-time continuum, and you could affect how things are in the future. If somebody dies in the past, maybe that shouldn't have died, if you're messing with time travel, then all of their maybe descendants are gone now. Or if you keep somebody alive who wasn't supposed to be alive, maybe they'll have a descendant who does something horrible that messes up, something. So you're supposed to not just go get what you were supposed to get and make it back to your time period. And then the other law, the number one absolute law, there were several, but the number one absolute law, after not trying to save anybody in their timeline or fix anything, was you cannot bring anybody back to the future. You just cannot. Whatever's going to happen to them again, it has to happen. So James breaks that first law. That is kind of what more than half of the book is about. But there's this conspiracy because he goes back to get something, and there's another con man there at the same time, and they never like send two people. And while he was there, like he had to be there for a couple of days to be able to kind of get what he came for, because people know he's there. It's not like he goes into time and he's invisible. I mean, he interacts with people and people see him, and they have these things that kind of camouflage their appearance. It's called like a paint or something, and it like makes them look like somebody else or somebody from that time so that people aren't suspicious. But he meets this woman, and it's like he's lonely in the future. That's all he does is work. He doesn't have anybody. He's like his past, he's kind of tortured by something that happened, and he's just, is basically killing himself doing all this work. And he meets this woman, and it's like he starts feeling, like, hey, maybe there's more to life than what I've been doing. And he brings her back with him, when he jumps back to the future. And that sets off a whole chain of, events where he start, he's a wanted man now because you committed this crime. And the people like on his planet, because he ends up going back to Earth, right, to hide her. And they go to this one area where there's people there, but I mean, the way it's described in the book, you would think this was some prehistoric thing, the way these people are living, but this is like after Earth has kind of been destroyed and only pieces of land still exist. But anyway, yeah, so people are after him. He's trying to keep her safe. He's kind of starting this new community with this group of people that live on this little plot of land on Earth, and he's time jumping, trying to help them now because he knows how to do it, and he still has some of his equipment. So he's like trying to help them survive, and he goes to places, and every time he jumps, two things happen. Number one, the people that are looking for him, they see these blips in the timeline and they know it's him, so they're getting closer to where he is. And the second thing that's happening, his system, like his body is failing, because you can only do so many jumps before, like, and this is the thing that I liked about this. It sounded as realistic as time travel could be, since we know it's not real, but his insides, like his organs, he's starting to have organ failure, like his stuff is melting and kind of mushing inside of his body. And they do have medicine, because I think the condition is called miasma. They have medicine that can cure it, and he's supposed to take it every time he jumps. But since he doesn't have access to it, he's getting weaker and weaker. And, but he's committed to helping this woman that he met, Elise, because she was a scientist in her time. So she's, when they go to this part of the earth that's kind of been, just destroyed or whatever, she starts taking samples because the water is no longer blue. It's just like sludgy. I mean, it doesn't even look like water from the way the author described it. It looks like oil is just flowing in these big open pits where the ocean used to be. And so she's done some sampling and she feels like she may be able to fix it or kind of go back and maybe stop it from happening. So that's kind of where she is, and James is like, he wants to help her do that while these people are coming at him. And so there was like this action adventure, like a little love story kind of in the corner, but I appreciate they didn't really focus that much on it. I mean, they had some affectionate moments and things like that, but as the reader, you're like, is she gonna be able to fix this? Are these people gonna find him? Like, what's going on? It was more, you were more drawn to that story than between him and Elise. And like I said, I just really love the way that the author created new words, new terminology, new things. And I typically, unless it's just like a clever line that a character says or something, I don't usually underline or highlight fiction books. I do that mostly in nonfiction books, to reference or whatever. But it was so much stuff in this book that I was underlining stuff and, like trying to make sure that I could keep up with what was going on. And like I said, that was my challenge initially. But after I kind of got it, okay, miasma is this. Okay, time jumping is that. Okay, this, then I was able to follow along with no problem. And my mind started opening up to imagining what those things could look like. Because before, that's what I mentioned, my problem a lot of times with a lot of sci-fi or fantasy books is, I love watching movies like that. But, everything's already created for you. You get to see the imagery on the screen. And a lot of times it's hard for me as a reader to imagine, because I know I'm not doing it justice, like what the author may be trying to describe or talk about. And I really love the way that Wesley Chu, the author, explained in his book how the time travel worked. And what happens is, wherever they're trying to jump to, like there's this, they open up this small hole in the space-time continuum or whatever, and the Cron men, because they're the only ones really trained and that have the expertise to jump into these places, and they have to, when it's time for them to exit, they've gotten what they need. They pull them back through the same hole where they jumped out of, so that it doesn't create maybe a small blip or a ripple. It doesn't affect anything. And when they go to get the items that they need, because sometimes it could be like, 2,000-pound generator. They obviously can't lift that or, get away with that without people seeing them. They have this thing called a nether stone or a tether stone or something like that. And the way that I saw it in my mind, it's like this little vacuum that kind of sucked up all the matter energy of this big thing into like a little capsule, if you will. And then that thing, like when you go to the banks and you go through the drive-through, if you're in the lanes further from the teller window, they have those like capsules where you open it and put your stuff and it sucks it back to the teller. That's kind of what I was imagining, because once you put it in there, then it gets sucked back to like the base where he was from, and they're able to extract it from there. So, just little things like that. Obviously, you have to suspend belief when you read books like this, but it made it seem more believable, because a lot of times when you're reading fiction books, even though keyword fiction, a lot of people get caught up in that would never happen. Oh, that can't happen. But it was really, fascinating how the author, it was almost as if maybe he was expecting people were going to be like, that could never happen, or that doesn't sound right. So he kind of explained, there were explanations for why it worked that way or why it was created like that. But like from the character's point of view, or just from the narration, he would kind of like say this thing and then say, this is why it works or how it works. So that, as a reader, you're not spending time going, what? How could that? Or whatever. It's like the explanation was right there. So I thought that was pretty cool. I loved the character development of the main character, James, because he kind of went from being this like really like a rough loner, like seemingly didn't even care if he lived or died, because he took on some really dangerous jobs. He was one of the top tiered conmen in his time. He met Elise and he met this group of people. He kind of got more in touch, or was drawn back to his humanity, because he is human, kind of like me and everybody who's watching this. Like, we're all descendants of people from like way back. You start tracing your genealogy or your family history, maybe you can trace it back to the early 1500s or further. That's kind of how it was, even though he was living on another planet, and humans as a species had evolved to be able to live in different places because the earth had been destroyed. He was still human, regardless to whether he lived in outer space. So being around those people kind of helped him get back in touch with that and kind of remember who he was. Now I will say, for as much as I enjoyed this, I was getting kind of close to the end, and I was thinking to myself, okay, they're not going to be able to resolve all this. There's like hardly anything left. What's going on here? And I don't know what made me do it. I don't know if I wanted to go back and look at reviews on Amazon, or, like to see if somebody said, oh, this book is going to leave you hanging, or, oh, the ending was good. I was looking for reviews without spoilers. Turns out this book is the first in a series. And right now it's only 2 books out. According to the reviews that I went down a rabbit hole, there was supposed to be 3 books come out. And the second book is called Time Siege. So this book came out in 2015. And I think that second book, The Time Siege, came out maybe like 2 or 3 years later. And here we are in 2022. There's no third book. But people are saying in the comments that The Time Siege, which is the second book that continues James's story and, what happened next, they're saying that, it ended where there has to be another one, and that the author had hinted at a third book coming out. See, now, as much as I like this, that is the only downer for me, because as many of you know, if you've been, watching my videos, I don't like sequels and series and all of that. That's kind of why, because you can get caught up in these stories, and if the author doesn't finish the book or finish the series, then you're kind of like stuck, like you just gotta kind of have a good imagination of what you think happened. And then also, I just want the story to be over. Like, did they have a happy ever after? Did he get caught? Did he die? Like, what happened? I don't want to have to go read another book and then another book to figure that out. I mean, I enjoyed these characters in that story, but I'm kind of over it. So having said that, I mean, it remains to be seen if I'm going to read the second book, The Time Siege, especially if there's a third book that who knows if it's coming out or not. I'm just going to have to assume, based on the way that this book ended, that, and with James being a protagonist and seeing all that character development, that good things are on the horizon for him and things are going to work out. Anyway, that was my review of The Time Salvager by Wesley Chu. If you are into sci-fi books and, you like that, the whole thing with the world building and what humanity and what is going to happen, after this earth collapses on us that we aren't taking care of, or how we're treating each other. I mean, this one is really interesting. But like I said, be prepared, because there's a cliffhanger at the end, but not so much. It's not one of those, and he jumped out the window, period, and that's the end, where you're thinking, well, did he land on his feet or whatever? There's something that happens that kind of wraps up another thing that was going through the book. So, I mean, like I said, I would like to know more, but I feel satisfied with having just read this one. But if you're into series and you have patience or whatever, you may want to check out The Time Siege and then just kind of be on the lookout for his next book. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you have read The Time Salvager by Wesley Chu, I would love to know what you thought. And if you have read The Time Siege, is it worth my time? Should I set aside some time to read it? Put it in there with the other hundreds of books that are on my TBR, or is it a hard pass? Can I pass on it? Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. And if you have not, now's your chance. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you'll be notified when I do a video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great weekend. Bye.